The narrative begins by showing a wide perspective of an unexplored universe. At this moment, a goblin calmly cleans his stained blade. Surrounded by several fallen figures, he simply rests in the center of the aftermath. Soon after, agonizing screams echo from inside the entrance of a cave. Noticing the commotion, the goblin observes the dark passage filled with defeated enemies. Silent, he examines his surroundings with extreme caution. Faced with the situation, the creature gains a grim confidence. Inside the place, the young Haein is tied up and terrified. One of the thugs checks her papers, confirming that the girl is from Beverly Hills. With a mocking tone, the bandits comment that the prisoner used to live in a very wealthy zip code. To start the conversation, the boss asks if she has calmed down enough to hear what he has to say. The outlaw notices the girl's shock at having suddenly appeared in that crazy universe. To confirm the desperate situation, the man warns her that in this place there is magic, elves, and orcs. Because they have been there longer, the criminals believe they have the right to control the territory. Holding the girl's face, the boss assures her that the newcomer will need a lot of help. To prove his point, he lifts the head of her fallen partner, warning her about what will happen if she refuses. Unable to speak due to the gag, Haein thrashes around in a panic. Due to the shock of the circumstance, the young woman simply passes out right there on the floor. The bandits mock her fragility, considering breaking a few teeth to force her to obey. However, another man interferes, asking them not to ruin the newcomer's face. After all, it has been a long time since such a beautiful woman appeared in that region. Determined to carry the prisoner to the camp, they start pulling the ropes mercilessly. Right at that moment, a hooded guy complains that he can no longer tolerate that disgusting situation. Startled by the interference, the bandits stare at the guy. Annoyed, one of the outlaws insults the man, demanding to know why he is meddling. The mysterious individual, however, remains silent in the face of the unprovoked insult. Abruptly, the cape is thrown far away, revealing himself to be the small goblin seen earlier, which leaves the criminals completely bewildered. Moving his blade skillfully, the creature gets ready for combat. Completely disoriented, the punks observe the scene without understanding where the monster came from. Drawing their attention, the goblin suggests they play a different game now. Full of anger at the audacity, one of the criminals goes on the offensive with fury in his eyes. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the little monster throws a blade right into a critical area of the opponent. Regaining consciousness, Haein observes the situation in disbelief. Panic takes over the young woman upon seeing the brutality occurring so close. Blinded by fury over the loss of their colleague, the other bandits attack the small warrior. Holding his weapon tightly, the creature gets ready to withstand the attacks. One of the criminals tries a frontal strike, aiming to take him down immediately. With great simplicity, the little fighter blocks the heavy man's charge. Immediately after, he begins his own retaliation with enormous speed, hitting the opponent squarely and making any defense attempt impossible. Losing his strength and screaming in agony, the man drops to his knees on the floor, defeated. Keeping his agility, the goblin pierces his weapon directly into the skull of another bandit. With only one survivor left, the last criminal freezes upon seeing his defeated partners. The prisoner keeps watching the chaos, trembling continuously and staying quiet. Walking towards the last man, the fighter warns that the game is not over yet. In a panic, the guy swings his sword clumsily to repel the creature. Yelling with all his might, he tries to set up a powerful attack from above. However, the goblin jumps high, gaining the necessary momentum. Due to the impact, he delivers a violent knee strike right to the middle of the criminal's face. The bandit is thrown far away, falling hard on the soft floor of the cave. Exhausted and unable to continue the battle, the bandit remains sprawled on the ground. Afraid of becoming the next target, Haein cries and begs the monster not to come near. Trying to preserve his life, the injured criminal backs away, offering food in exchange. Completely changing his attitude, he praises the small being for understanding the human language. Begging for mercy, the guy anxiously asks what the small warrior wants. The answer comes as a merciless knife strike to the man's torso, finishing the job permanently and without any compassion. Settling on the ground fatigued, the green-skinned combatant acknowledges that the clash drained him. Until the moment the being notices something nearby and suddenly turns his head. Tied up and withdrawn, the young woman waits for her cruel fate without saying a word. Heading towards her, the goblin drives the large blade into the wooden frame, breaking the bindings that held the girl's arms with extreme precision. Roughly, he points out that he still needed to decide what to do with her there. Freed from the ropes, Haein remains on the ground, rubbing her sore wrists. Gathering an ounce of bravery, she hesitates, but asks if he is also from the States. Glancing over his own shoulder, the creature asks if he happens to have human features. Amidst tears, she argues that he speaks the language, knows what an ID is, and rescued her. Immediately, the small being ends the subject, coldly stating that he didn't save anyone. Desperate for true information, the young woman begs him to clarify the situation. Annoyed, he asks if the newcomer didn't pay attention to what the criminals said, promptly explaining that they both had good lives until they woke up ruined in that parallel universe. Grabbing her own head, Heian goes into a total meltdown with this absurd narrative about an alternate world, analyzing the terrifying state of panic of the young human. The goblin determines that, at that moment, she should also be able to see reality. The green combatant asks if she isn't seeing the task she was assigned. With this, Heian is completely bewildered, not grasping the meaning of it. Suddenly, the young woman's field of vision is filled with a bright digital alert. Startled by the blue panel hovering ahead, she stammers, trying to understand what it is about. Finding it funny, the creature warns her that she will be able to adjust to the place if she completes those tasks, and might even receive rewards. Turning his back to leave, the small one simply orders the newcomer to keep fighting to stay alive. However, Heian clings to his leg in a panic, begging him to wait and explain this crazy situation better. Bothered by the annoying persistence, the combatant stops immediately. Without hesitation, he kicks the human away without any mercy. Nimbly, the small monster positions the blade right at the girl's neck. With extreme apathy, he warns her that he is the most dangerous creature in the area, asking what the naive girl is still expecting from him. The small being declares that, from now on, he will eliminate anyone, making it clear that sparing her life was nothing more than a simple momentary whim. Crying hard, Heian asks the reason for such malice, considering he had the full ability to help people. Upon hearing these words, the creature freezes entirely as the question resonates deeply in his mind. At this moment, the goblin's consciousness is dragged to a memory under heavy rain, where a voice cried saying that this couldn't be happening. In the middle of the storm, a man cries in despair, begging for help. Leaning on him, the woman named Seulgi is slowly slipping away. The sound of metal boots walking interrupts the noise of the storm approaching the duo. The man looks up, devastated, towards the individual carrying the holy sword. A majestic warrior positions herself exactly in front of the tearful survivor. The woman, recognized as Hayuri, maintains a completely impassive posture. Totally shattered, the man demands the fulfillment of the promise the warrior had made to help everyone have a good life in that distinct universe. Screaming with all the anguish in his soul, he asks the reason for that, since she had the means to rescue the group. Drawing her blade, the warrior labels the tragedy as an honorable sacrifice after the group had perfectly executed the task. Devoid of any compassion, the woman sentences the man to his end, blaming him for the passing of a comrade. The guy defends himself from the strike with his sword, shouting that her troops took down his pregnant partner and he only tried to prevent it. Due to the power of the opponent's attack, the man coughs heavily, unable to stand firm. Taking advantage of the vulnerability, the knight throws the survivor into the mud, ordering the traitor to shut up for good. Collapsed in the dirty ground, he reiterates those absurd claims about an honorable sacrifice with profound outrage. Choking on his own words, the guy babbles that all of this is nothing but a huge lie. Overcome by an absolute resentment, the young man casts a curse upon all humanity using the remainder of his energy. With the desire to tear apart every single individual with his bare hands, he warns that he would give anything for payback. Returning to the present moment, the goblin vibrates with fury, remembering that treachery while he stares at the young woman. Taking a deep breath, the warrior decides to give an answer to the girl's question about the reason for his behavior. Overflowing with anger, the little monster yells that he despises and looks down on humans, because he is no longer part of that group. Enveloped by the darkness of the cave, the creature definitively accepts his new identity as a green-skinned individual. The traumatic memories keep tormenting his conscience, repeating the warrior's deceitful words of sorrow. The memory of that woman condemning him to his end for treason resurfaces like a distressing nightmare. He recalls the moment he tried to fight for himself, remembering the suffering of losing his family. The gravity of being pressed into the mud by the cruel knight returns intensely to his memory. Completely destroyed, the man noticed his existence fading away under that freezing rain. The terrible irony of being branded a traitor right after giving his all eats him up inside. The bitterness against his own species solidified at that moment, creating an intense plague. That instinctive grudge drove him to want to slice up every one of his tormentors regardless of the price. Suddenly, the mental panorama transforms into air bubbles slowly rising in dark water. Breaking the surface, the goblin comes out of the lake gasping for oxygen with a harsh cry. Panting heavily in the middle of the water, the creature shows himself completely bewildered for still being alive. His first instinct is to desperately search for his partner in the middle of that shadow. However, upon observing his own physique and seeing the green skin, he panics, trying to understand what happened. At this moment, a gigantic mystic circle starts shining intensely on the floor of that enigmatic place. Frightened by the brightness, the former human curses without having the slightest idea of where he ended up. Looking at his own hands equipped with claws, panic takes over as he realizes his new animalistic body. A majestic shaman appears in the darkness, announcing that the human essence of that being had faded away permanently. The new combatant turns around sharply, terrified of the tribal entity's figure. Wearing a skull mask, the chief reveals himself as Morkzul, the shaman of the combatants. Extending his hand, the elderly warrior decides to grant him a true name from the Goblin community. Static before the enchantment of the moment, the small being listens carefully to his new future being shaped. With a deep tone of voice, the shaman permanently names him Gorls. Realizing the importance of the rite in his heart, he thinks about what it means to be seen as an immense vessel. The narrative returns to the destruction caused to the criminals, showing that all that fatal precision was the work of the newly named Gorls. Watching everything from a distance, a goblin archer gives a proud smile at the dexterity of her group ally. In the center of the base covered in the aftermath, the shooter commands the other members to wait right there. The combatant named Mev runs towards the woods, completely ecstatic to follow her romantic partner. Back in the cave, Gorls interrupts his own daydreams and gets ready to leave. Turning his back to the young woman, he orders her to disappear from there quickly before he changes his mind and ends her run. However, Heian stands up in a panic, begging to accompany the goblin and guaranteeing she will do whatever he orders. Gorls asks if she has lost her mind for wanting to follow a dangerous monster. At this moment, Heian screams, stating that he is not a monster. The girl defends that the people lied and tried to assault her, asking who the real monster in this context is. On her knees and crying non-stop, the young woman reveals that the green-skinned warrior is the only individual she trusts right now. Letting out a long sigh, the goblin softly taps his fist on the girl's skull to teach her something. Maintaining a severe posture, he warns her that it is exactly for blindly believing in people that she is in this torment. Raising the volume of his voice, the small warrior makes it clear that there is nothing to be trusted in these parts. Changing the subject, Gorls communicates that there are several bases of living humans spread throughout the area. Acting with indifference, the creature assures her that she will find individuals far more upstanding than him in these places. Before leaving, the warrior tosses a small item right into the young woman's palms. While Heian examines the object, disoriented, he informs her that to enter a base she will need to pay a hefty price. Therefore, Gorls advises her to keep the item hidden and use it in a critical situation, since, even without hitting a fatal spot, tearing exposed skin already offers a chance of triumph. Annoyed, he turns around and ends the conversation, warning that the young woman will meet her end by his hands if she speaks again. However, Heian screams, calling for her hero to wait, begging in tears to find out his name before they part ways. The small being pauses his walk and remembers his old human name, choosing to abandon that facet definitely. Accepting his new existence, he proudly proclaims that his name is Gorls, the immense vessel. Right after, the combatant starts searching through an abandoned wooden crate in the cave. At this moment, Mev appears, asking if he allowed the human to escape, emphasizing that the strategy was to hunt and eliminate anyone of that species. Noticing the archer's arrival, the warrior merely acknowledges her presence. Showing a bit of jealousy, the goblin mentions that the human was carrying his knife, something that not even she herself had received yet. Crouched near the objects, Gorls explains that taking down a miserable human woman like that generates zero experience and only causes problems. Completely fascinated, the ally deduces that he only wants to fight powerful individuals, referring to the small warrior as her partner with great excitement. Approaching, Mev asks how powerful this so-called wielder of the holy sword is for him to crave taking her down so much. Standing up calmly, the combatant changes his tone and explains that he doesn't want to eliminate her just because of strength. With his eyes overflowing with resentment, Gorls reveals that he wants to wipe out those who stole his universe from him. Faced with this sudden wrath, the shooter takes a step back, somewhat frightened by the intensity of that moment. The goblin's thoughts return to the dark past, remembering that humanity eradicated his only reason to live and the individual he so desperately wanted to protect. Overcome by indignation, he points to his own body and recalls that those same traitors also took away his existence. He starts walking outside and admits he doesn't understand his return to life, but assures that now nothing will be able to contain his wrath. Listening to the haunting monologue, the archer freezes while her colleague vows to pay whatever price necessary to shatter his adversaries. The dense atmosphere in the room makes Mev shrink entirely, overcome by fear. Consumed by the craving for payback, the little monster emits a crushing presence, promising to return all the anguish he experienced. The The commitment to return the suffering dominates the place fiercely. Faced with all this desire for combat, tears of pure panic slide down the allies' face. Unable to bear the suffocating tension, the goblin loses her balance and falls sitting on the dirt, letting out a scream. Regaining his senses with a start, Gorls panics upon noticing his partner's condition and calls out to her. Crying on the ground, Mev admits her fear of seeing her partner enraged like that, immediately earning an apology as he was not furious with her. Changing the direction of the conversation, the boss asks her to summon the other members and gather all the objects to present to the shaman. Quickly, the shooter stands up with great enthusiasm and starts shouting commands for the other goblins to act fast. Outside the cave, the combatant climbs on a rock and observes the vastness of that universe. Feeling the breeze touch his skin, he silently analyzes the scenery while outlining his future actions. The sound of footsteps at a distance catches the combatant's focus. He assumes that the human woman is running in panic through the woods seeking survival in this dangerous environment. In a nimble gesture, the short guy activates the system menu that hovers right in front of him. Checking the task, he notices he has already defeated 29 humans, with only one single takedown left to earn the upgrade bonus. Confident in his own strength, Gorls notes that he has become much faster and more lethal, aware that the upcoming clashes will be simple once he becomes a full goblin warrior. Pulling the boss from his thoughts, the shooter appears loudly shouting his name. Mev communicates that she has already stored all the useful items from the base and wants to know what the next move will be. He clarifies that certain bandits escaped during the ambush and will undoubtedly return with help quickly. Guiding the troop with a wicked smile, the short guy determines that this environment will serve as a grave for the adversaries. At the same moment, the sun shines intensely in the sky, lighting up the dense forest. After a while, the cave's entrance remains silent, waiting for the victims to appear. Exhausted from the manual labor, the shooter wipes the sweat from her face after setting up the field. Dissatisfied with the lack of caution, the boss scolds Mev for not proceeding with more subtlety in the task. Suddenly, another lackey yells, calling the leader from the end of the corridor. The small creature appears with a smile and attests that the team carried out the given orders precisely. The subordinate proudly informs that all the ambushes and barriers are already properly placed. Patting the small monster's skull, Gorls celebrates the execution, yet denies being the leader of the pack. Another goblin approaches, reporting having witnessed the combat against the humans, and for that reason accepts him as supreme commander. Enthusiastic, the small combatant asks if the other members agree with this resolution. The entire tribe cheers in unison, embracing the newcomer as the group's new leader. Taking the opportunity, Mev wraps her arm around the commander, declaring that she also approves of him, but only as her partner. Interrupting the atmosphere, a sentry arrives hurriedly in the corridor to report that the people are arriving. Drawing his blade, the commander declares that the time has begun and orders the entire tribe to fall back and find safe shelter. He then turns back and explicitly requests the shooter's help for the imminent battle. With her projectile positioned, Mev assures she will launch a rain of strikes on the adversaries in honor of her partner. With a confident smile on his face, the leader declares the beginning of the hunt against the humans. On the outside, the rescue team appears and immediately goes into shock at the giant puddle of crimson spread across the dirt. Wielding a heavy hatchet, the leader of the criminals asks the survivor if a single goblin caused all that ruin. Pulling the henchman by the shirt, the giant believes the whole situation is a terrible joke. Shaking with dread, the lackey reaffirms that the little creature resembled a crazed beast, annihilating everyone mercilessly. Fed up with the excuses, the huge man curses the coward and lets him go with extreme force. Unable to stand, the survivor falls backward into the dirty vegetation. The leader, therefore, orders his right-hand man to lead the troops to capture the small adversary without ending him. Looking at the other bandits, the second-in-command shouts the directive to move forward to apprehend the target. However, a precise projectile embeds itself in the skull of the second-in-command while he was speaking. The guy's body collapses onto the solid earth, losing his life abruptly. Absolutely perplexed by the surprise attack, the boss screams, demanding to find out the origin of the strike. Pointing at the vegetation in a state of shock, the survivor warns that there is a creature hidden in that place. Hidden in the foliage, the shooter launches her arrows with extremely high accuracy and calm. Another criminal is hit squarely by a critical strike in the chest area. As the subordinate falls to the ground, the leader insults the survivor, calling him useless for not warning about the risk. Observing the confusion from an elevated position, Mev shows a proud smile, labeling the individuals as fools. Nimbly, the creature jumps through the tree branches, changing her position in the combat space. Angry at the men's inaction, the big guy shouts, ordering everyone to run to capture the target alive. Holding their gear, the bandits move forward, screaming crazily towards the woods. Moving through the passages, the shooter escapes quickly in order to draw the intruder's attention. With a fearless jump, Mev slides through the rocks, gaining more and more distance. Right after touching the dirt, the goblin proceeds with her calculated path through the darkness. Enraged by the retreat, the bandit's commander orders his team to catch the disgusting creature. Following the order, the men advance in mass through the narrow passages of the cave. Reaching her commander, the archer communicates that the individuals took the bait in the trap, earning recognition for the work. Thrilled with the success, Mev nods and gets ready to flee through the second exit. Meanwhile, the group of invaders stumbles upon a vast pile of rocks blocking the route. Exhaling in disappointment, the giant grumbles about the dishonor of being fooled by a mere little monster. Paying no mind to the barrier, one of the men tries to keep moving forward anyway. At that moment, a hidden fuse starts burning quickly, sparking. Disoriented by the noise, the lackey stops and tries to understand the situation. Resting his weapon on his body, the commander asks if the opponent thought those rocks would represent a real barrier. The giant even agrees that the green combatant has much more intelligence than his own men. Suddenly, the commander's expression changes entirely upon realizing the looming threat. He notices something unusual hidden right in the middle of that pile of rubble. Reaching his hand closer, the bandit recognizes a barrel packed with explosives ready to go off. Ignoring the threat, the lackey draws the commander's focus to the item. Entering a state of pure terror, the giant screams for everyone to run away from there as fast as possible. However, the lackey simply freezes, unable to grasp the urgency of the warning. In the subsequent second, a massive detonation mercilessly devours the thugs. The extreme temperature completely sears the bodies of those who were near the explosives. Due to the force, the brutal blast obliterates the cave's access, blowing everything outside. One of the surviving men is thrown a great distance by the incredible power of the boom. Sprawled on the dirt, the guy coughs intensely and insults the creature with all his remaining anger. Surrounded by the thick curtain of smoke, the bandit tries to recover from the impact he suffered. Looking at the ruin from afar, the shooter is shocked by the magnitude of the damage. Worried, the ally turns around and asks if her commander is hurt. However, she stammers in terror upon seeing her ally enveloped by a bluish mystical glow. Reaching the precise amount of takedowns, the interface validates the task and grants the long-awaited level upgrade. The energy fades, showing Gorl's new and majestic body. Sporting a cruel smile, he takes a deep breath, feeling the transformation run through his veins. The leader contemplates the incredible perception of power, greatly appreciating the experience of becoming stronger. Nearby, the injured bandit presses on his own limb, trying to contain the fluid loss. Indignant, the survivor complains about having warned of the threat and insults his fallen companions, calling them fools. Hearing footsteps in the smoke, the guy mocks, labeling the monster as a stubborn insect. However, the laughter vanishes upon observing the green combatant appear intact and much more dangerous. With a fatal serenity, the creature draws his sharp blade, getting ready for the questioning. Overcome by dread, the bandit screams in shock, facing the imminence of his end. Shaking non-stop, the man tries to protect himself using the remaining piece of his broken blade. Staring at the victim, the commander warns that the person will serve as a meal if he doesn't reveal everything with absolute truth. Cornered, the hostage tries to calm down and agrees to the conditions to preserve his life. Sometime later, a vast facility of living humans is observed from a distance. The base remains identical to the one the combatant remembered from his previous life. Noticing the boss acting distant, Mev asks what happened, but he only assures her that the situation just got simpler. Shifting the focus, the leader advises that it is necessary to report the progress to the group's shaman first and foremost. He orders the subordinates to obtain brand new gear at the base and return shortly after. Taking advantage of the break, the hostage demands his long-awaited release. The guy recalls that he has already marked the route and validated the exact location of the people's camp. Keeping his promise, the green leader agrees to spare the spy's existence, as agreed. Comforted by the confirmation, the man asks if it is true, showing a ray of optimism on his face. The subordinates start kicking the guy away, ordering him to get lost already since he got his pardon. Turning his back to the group, the disloyal man curses the beings in his thoughts, believing he came out victorious. However, the tiny beings follow the man closely, carrying blades and letting out dark chuckles. Suddenly, a knife pierces the back of the man's torso in a completely treacherous way. The guy lets out a heart-wrenching scream of agony as he feels the metal cutting his skin. Quickly, one of the subordinates covers the target's mouth to muffle the sound of the assault. In a coordinated charge, the small beings strike the man multiple times, devoid of pity. Paying attention to the guidance map, the commander says coldly that he promised not to take him out, but he couldn't vouch for his men's actions. Abandoned in the muddy liquid, the criminal's disfigured body sinks completely lifeless. Back at the clan's cave, the elderly healer asks about the request for equipment to raid the human base. On his knees in a show of reverence, the combatant reports that he has already evaluated all the details of the target thoroughly. He assures that a sudden charge would guarantee a very simple triumph for the whole community. Listening to the strategy, the older leader murmurs, pondering the bold suggestion. Suddenly, a yell echoes demanding that the healer deny the request immediately. Gorls turns his head and stares at the gigantic hobgoblin who just unexpectedly interrupted the assembly. The giant named Goff argues that they should be getting ready for the Supreme Leader's summons. Detailing the rush, the newcomer warns that the long journey will require an immense stockpile of resources. Agreeing with the time limit, Morkzul confesses he has no concrete reasons to refuse the newcomer's charge. Outraged, the hobgoblin points his finger, accusing the newcomer of being just a useless rookie combatant. Standing up calmly, the reborn man calls the brute to follow him on the task in order to back up the army. With a challenging smile, he asks if the giant has enough bravery to withstand the difficulty. Clenching his fists violently, Goff loses his patience, asking if the little guy is testing his capabilities. Maintaining the threatening attitude, Gorls accepts the provocation, guaranteeing to reveal his true competence. Lightening the heavy atmosphere, the shooter arrives in a hurry, yelling for her familiar to find her partner's whereabouts. Facing the former human, Goff asks if he has the bravery to accept a duel of honor. Hearing the speech, Mev seems completely shocked by the unexpected invitation. Without backing down, the leader accepts the brawl, but sets the condition that the loser will have to yield whatever the winner desires. Faced with the bold reply, the archer is left in a state of acute perplexity. Taking the floor, Morkzul formally makes the clash official. Distressed, the young woman questions the reason the elder accepted the event. Right after, the two fighters march towards the middle of a vast combat arena. While the MC waits serenely, the audience chants the giant's name continuously. Ready for battle, the hobgoblin stares at his rival from a distance. In the stands, the shooter complains to the small ally for not blocking the boss's decision to enter the fight. The subordinate argues that there was no opening for any action, since Gorls nodded immediately and the choice cannot be revoked. From the highest point of the arena, the elder determines that the clash will happen without gear or spells, ending only when one of them gives up or loses consciousness. Frightened, the lackey warns his partner that the giant has a terrifying nature and won't hold back his strength. Without further delay, the elderly man waves his arm and grants authorization for the match to begin. Overcome by anger, the giant lets out a deafening roar, calling his rival to the brawl. Going on the offensive with full force, he mocks the small one for thinking he is superior just because of his recent evolution to warrior. Winding up a powerful attack, the giant swears to shatter the commander's skeleton to prevent him from battling again. However, Gorls dodges the frontal charge with immense ease. Taking advantage of the opening, the former human delivers a severe punch directly to the rival's gut. Due to the impact, the giant loses his breath and drops to his knees on the arena floor. Without losing momentum, the MC follows up with a brutal knee strike directly to the brute's face. Completely dazed, the hobgoblin collapses backward onto the ground, kicking up a lot of dust. In the bleachers, the shooter and the rest of the clan watch the situation absolutely shocked. Shaking in agony, the giant grinds his teeth trying to regain his senses. Noticing that the brute refuses to surrender, the spectators start cheering his name enthusiastically again. Analyzing his tenacity, Gorls asks if he really doesn't plan on giving up, getting the validation right after. Next, the short guy moves quickly and grabs the rival's throat with great intensity. Unable to breathe, the beaten combatant widens his eyes, realizing the suffocating grip. In a fraction of time, he falls completely unconscious and starts foaming at the mouth, out cold. Released by the commander, the immense body of the hobgoblin plummets to the dirt, totally senseless. Exhaling monotonously, the ex-human notes that the rival has an adequate build, but an absolutely ineffective combat style. Celebrating the crushing triumph, the shooter jumps for joy while the other members go into ecstasy. From his position, Morkzul announces Gorls as the formidable winner and warns that he will grant his request. Turning to the elder, the hero pays his thanks for the deference by striking his own chest with reverence. Running down the stairs, the young woman hurries towards her partner. Overcome by emotion, Mev throws herself into a tight hug, almost knocking the combatant to the ground. She continuously boasts about her ally's power, confessing she hesitated about the triumph, but then she brags to the others about how fantastic her partner is. Right behind, the subordinate communicates that he will be the leader's main assistant from this moment on. The shooter doesn't fall behind and demands a physical union that very day. Interrupting the celebration, the healer comes marching majestically toward the winner. The girl yells for her familiar full of enthusiasm, and the elderly healer simply nods at the greeting. With a vigorous gesture, Morkzul slams the end of his staff forcefully on the floor. Soon, a bluish mystical aura begins to emanate intensely from the impact area. A gigantic circle portal appears, lighting up the whole field with its formidable ancient magic power. Seeing the magic up close, the former human seems very amazed to witness this type of skill in action. The elder orders the commander to step closer swiftly, revealing that there is a person wishing to meet him. Consenting to the call, the hero follows the elder, crossing the glowing rift alongside the shooter. On the other end, the team appears underneath a colossal and quite sophisticated dome. As soon as they step on the crimson carpet, the mystic rift closes quickly behind them. Pointing the way, the healer leads the combatant through the immense, richly decorated space. They stop in front of a sophisticated counter, while a different light of dark power forms in the room. Originating from the brightness, strange feet float down until they bump into the floor very delicately. The hero looks up totally focused, trying to understand who just landed in the space. Showing her figure, a goblin with golden skin greets the healer, mentioning that they haven't met in a long time. As an answer, the elderly boss strikes the end of his staff once again on the floor with conviction. The mysterious blue energy once again dissipates quickly across the rock floor of the room. Preserving his majestic energy, the community's boss casts his enigmatic transport magic again. Curious about the context, Gorls carefully watches the mastery of this energy emanating through the environment. The elder reiterates the initial call, signaling that the deals will actually begin. Without questioning his superior's orders, the greenish leader walks through the spell in complete silence. The grandiose architecture of the room continues to shine under the light bouncing off the polished and immaculate floor. Walking together, the two fighters get ready for the secrets the elder plans to show. Examining the vast hall, the MC asks the elder where they really are. Setting the question aside, the elder raises his arm and orders the combatant to approach without hesitation. Complying promptly, the former human marches towards his leader as a show of reverence. At that moment, a tiny mystical flame appears glowing on the tip of the wise healer's finger. Demanding complete surrender, the clan's boss orders the little one to bend down and lower his head. The magical touch of the digit transmits a discreet force directly into the silent fighter's conscience. With authority, Morkzul grants the combatant permission to create his own independent tribe, which leaves him perplexed. The elder explains the choice, stating that the apprentice has a lot of merit and already possesses several authentic followers supporting him. Furthermore, the elder informs that the individual waiting in the hall will be tasked with backing him up on this new journey. The memory of the directives ends, and the two focus again on the dark rift glowing on top of the fancy table. Emerging from the mysterious energy light, feet touch the tapestry quite softly once again. The person reveals herself to be Rumpelstiltskin, the golden goblin, who gives a polite smile upon seeing the elder again after several years. Staring at the surprise up close, the MC is amazed to find himself before such an unusual and glowing creature. Quite relaxed, the young woman settles on the edge of the counter, validating the newcomer's doubts. Without beating around the bush, she calls Gorls by his title and mentions having heard that the young man needs new weaponry. Leaning on the furniture, the golden goblin warns that everything has a price, and it is not possible to hand over the gear without payment. However, initially she asks to listen to his journey, inviting the combatant to take a seat for a moment. Pulling out the seat, Gorls settles in front of the enigmatic host. He nods at the request and asks where he should start the story. After a while, the former human finishes the narration of his passing and return, assuring that this is the complete truth. At this moment, Rumpelstiltskin starts shaking continuously, containing her own excitement. With momentum, the girl slams both palms on the counter, praising the narrative as a brilliant masterpiece. Pointing her finger, she announces with a loud voice that it was the most formidable tale she had ever heard. Startled by the commotion, the green leader merely stares at the girl's disproportionate response. The enthusiasm is so great that papers and mystical items start levitating chaotically around the luxurious room. Resting on her knees on the counter, the goblin determines that this tale will become the most precious item in her collection. With a snap of her fingers, she emanates even more of her mystic power through the room. Jumping enthusiastically, the golden goblin screams how much she was enchanted by all of that. Settling close to him, Rumpel celebrates that it had been a good while since anyone had thrilled her this way. Finding no humor in it whatsoever, Gorls loses his patience, internally questioning what she enjoyed about his misfortune, feeling an immense urge to execute her right that exact moment. Standing up from the seat, the green combatant immediately asks if he is already authorized to pick up the gear he came looking for. Finding his urgency very funny, Rumpelstiltskin consents, remembering that he can't battle unarmed. With a nimble jump, the golden goblin returns behind her counter with extreme dexterity. Getting very close to the warrior's face, she promises to hand over an exclusive bonus for her immense vessel. Walking on the carpet, the goblin simply tells the newcomer to follow her across the room. Unlocking a gigantic golden rift, the owner of the place announces she will show what she prepared. Analyzing a tome, Rumpel murmurs enchanted about the drama of a betrayal, loving every single detail. Crossing the energy, the commander reappears wearing his new and majestic faction leader armor. Observing the look, the golden goblin praises that right now he resembles an authentic boss and asks if everything is set. Adjusting the piece on his neck, Gorls nods yes, noticing a much more intense energy flowing through his physique. Relaxed, the goblin slides and lies on top of the counter very comfortably. Watching the subordinates gearing up in the background, she takes pride in claiming that her intuition never misses. Extending her finger, the young woman orders the fighter to focus intensely on the details of the buffs. The commander remains completely silent, focused on absorbing the crucial guidelines. Next, a white banner containing a blade emblem flutters in the summoned base. Turning back, the boss hears his title being called out successively. From the top of a rock, he stares at his brand new contingent of goblins gathered at the bottom, revering their leader. With determination, Gorls grips the handle of his newly obtained blade. Drawing the equipment, the combatant orders his allies to push forward, because the time for the hunt has begun. Letting out terrifying battle cries, the crowd of creatures charges with full force towards the target. At the top of the pole, the banner of the newly created faction shakes heavily against the strong wind. Meanwhile, human military personnel flee in a panic through the barracks searching for their combat gear. Entering a cabin, an individual warns the battalion commander that they are under ambush. Out of breath, the bearer of the news details that the attackers aren't bandits, but actually a goblin army. Perplexed by the irrational news, the men's officer is left not understanding the situation. Breaking the defenses, the greenish group breaches the human area hungry for elimination. At that moment, Rumpel's tone resonates in Gorls' conscience, clarifying the first gift granted. Slashing through people without mercy, the interface informs that all the tribe's takedowns will be aligned with the boss. In the memory of the room, the golden goblin gets ready to explain the second benefit of the offer. Focused, the former human just listens to the magic phrases, folding his upper limbs. Resuming her steps, Rumpel assures that he will have the ability to access the system's task interface. The combatant widens his eyes in amazement, noticing that the girl actually conjured the mystic screen. The creature details that he will be able to use this feature in any location, without hindrance. Returning to the chaos, Gorls waves his arm and accesses the task of hunting people hovering in space. Smiling discreetly, he admits that performing these system actions sounds like something pulled straight out of a fantasy novel. In the center of the riot, a human soldier screams in agony as he is attacked with bites by the invading mob. In a panic, another remnant swings a flaming stake, trying to repel the creature that jumped on him. Holding on tight, a guard attacks with his blade, trying to preserve his own existence. In pairs, the military personnel try to counterattack the charges of the green-skinned aggressors. Through a precise strike, a creature's head is launched, spraying crimson across the base's grounds. Reaching the front lines, the human officer insults his soldiers for showing dread toward vulnerable beings. Wielding his blade, he orders everyone to educate those insignificant beings for having faced the human species. However, during his speech, a violent strike hits the officer's face unexpectedly. The guy freezes instantly with a piece of metal embedded exactly in the center of his vision. With a lethal expression, Gorls furiously asks who that pile of manure was labeling as a vulnerable creature. Lifeless, the robust body of the officer collapses, falling backward onto the filthy dirt. The soldier next to him goes into a state of shock upon noticing that the commander was eliminated so quickly by a mere goblin. Abandoning the clash, the young man turns his back and escapes, yelling that those creatures are not normal. Terror controls the remaining humans, who run in a panic, leading a mass escape. Seeing the adversaries flee like cowards, the green leader merely brands them as idiots. Celebrating, one of the subordinates comes close, praising the leader's glorious clash. The former human maintains a scowling face, focused on his own reasoning right after the triumph. In his memory, Rumpelstiltskin asks with a smile if he had already picked a title for the faction. The combatant fell silent at that moment, pondering the alternatives very calmly. Back to the present moment, Gorls forcefully pulls his blade stuck in his rival's face. The fresh crimson of the fallen captain drips down, staining the sharp metal. Staring at his soldiers, the boss congratulates his green-skinned allies for having battled so exceptionally. Standing in front of the whole group, he announces in a loud voice that from this date forward they have been reborn. Listening carefully, Mev and the tribe hear the leader recall that they spent their lives hiding and escaping in dread. Raising his face, he concludes the speech announcing that they have finally achieved the definitive triumph over humans. Overcome by the emotion of the occasion, Gorls yells to his forces that from today onwards, they will achieve even more triumphs. Raising his blade towards the sky before the army, the commander continues his speech full of pride, revealing their identity. At that moment, the boss announces in a clear and powerful voice that they make up the formidable Crimson Dagger clan. The cheers of celebration from the horde resound far off on the horizon, signaling the definitive capture of the human base.